Hi there, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. I'd like to give it about another minute or two before we officially kick things off, but thank you for your patience and I appreciate those of you that already logged on. Talk soon. Thank you. Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone and thank you for joining our first webinar of 2025. As you see here, we're going to be talking about the budgeting mindset, and it's the beginning of the year, and I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to revisit the topic of not only how you're budgeting your money, but also take a little bit of time to reflect on the individual goals that you have for yourself and for your entire household financially. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how to incorporate those goals into the budgeting that you're doing. And we have some easy steps that you can take, a couple tips that will help you as you start to walk through that process. My name is Kyle Bingham. I'm the managing director for our financial wellness program, and joining me is one of our education consultants, Josh Zeb. He's traveling throughout the country and working with hundreds and hundreds of individuals on a year-to-year basis, and so he'll be able to provide some insight into what a lot of the conversations look like for those that are either putting their budget together or possibly revising that. Now, as we kick things off, before we get into some of the tips as it relates to budgeting, I want to take a step back and focus a little bit on financial goals. And I think one of the most common questions that we get for folks all the way from just starting out in their career, all the way to late career or even post-career or retirement, and that question is, what is it that I need to be focusing on financially? And so what you see here are some guidelines that can help you to see, as you're starting to set your financial goals for 2025, what are some of those other things or topics or concepts that you need to be looking at. And so I'll walk you through a couple really quick examples. So for those of you that are early career, I think it's perhaps building a budget for the first time. Oftentimes there's some debt and we're trying to create a debt reduction plan, but then we're also starting to save for retirement and starting to build up our emergency fund. And then as we move more into kind of our mid-career, we're looking at major purchases. We're looking at starting to try to maximize the amount of money that we're saving for retirement. For some of us, we may have children, and now we're thinking about saving for that child's education. As you continue to move throughout your life, as you're getting more into late career, you have topics like catch-up contributions that come into play. Now we're focusing on maybe retirement within the next 5 to 10 years. So not only are we trying to pay down our debt, we're trying to get all of our debts paid off. And then for those that maybe have already left their career, they've retired, and they're in post-career, there's still a lot of important decisions that need to be made. Things like, how are we structuring our income in retirement? How are we structuring things like Social Security? How are we withdrawing that money? When are we withdrawing that money from those different retirement accounts? So I think as we set the stage for today, I want you to take a moment and just focus on where you're at right now in your own career, and maybe jot down a couple of those suggestions that you see here, because we're going to show you how you take these individual financial goals and then you put them into the specific budget framework that you're going to be working with. Now, in addition to goals, Another really important concept or factor that we have to consider are these different life events that are going to be happening in all of our lives. We've all been there. As you're looking at some of these different examples, I'm sure that many of you, myself included, have gone through a couple of these different life events. Life events, I like to describe those almost as a triggering event that should almost immediately take us back to looking at our financial plan, looking at our budget, how we're managing our money, and what our cash flow looks like. Now, for some things, they're going to come up unexpected. But for a lot of these life events, these are things that we can also plan for. So in addition to kind of thinking about your financial goals, I want you to also think about what are some of those life events that are on the horizon. Maybe it's happening in 2025. Maybe it's something that's 3 to 5 years out, or maybe even longer. But also, as you're doing your goal setting and as you start to put your budget together, we really need to be thinking about not only what that life event is, but how is that going to impact our cash flow? And then how are we going to be able to incorporate that into the way that we're budgeting our money on a month-to-month and on an annual basis. And like I said, we're going to give you some examples here and some framework to work with, but this really kind of sets the foundation for the importance of what we're going to talk about now, which is budgeting your money. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Josh for just a moment and kind of let him walk through a couple important tips that he uses with a lot of the individuals that he works with as he walks through this process of how to budget your money. Josh?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kyle. I really appreciate you having me on here and talking about this subject. I think it's such an important time for everybody just to kind of hone in on these goals, especially, I say it's the beginning of the new year, but it's almost February already, right? So, but it's something that I think we can all kind of go into 2025 and really look and focus in on, what are our priorities? What part of our career are we trying to focus in on? Are we trying to, make a budget for just ourselves? Are we trying to plan for something for the future? Are we just trying to save for retirement, or really just maybe make an emergency expense, or, emergency savings account of some kind? And a couple things with the budgeting aspect. Budgeting can be such a broad term, and as you can see by these statements here, I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I will tell you this. I probably budget different than how Kyle budgets, or from a couple other colleagues, or from some participants I've worked with. And the main thing is we want to stick with whatever works for us. As long as we can track things, as long as it makes sense, as long as it's a comfortability thing. There's a lot of different avenues when it comes to, tracking a budget and making sure that we're prioritizing those goals throughout. So as we get to the next page, we wanted to kind of show you a couple different good steps to follow when it comes to maybe making a budget and maybe emphasizing those goals that we're keep on talking about. So number one, understand your income, really knowing what your inflows are per month, not just you, but if you have a spouse or partner, really important to kind of know what both of you are bringing in. Number two, which is going to be the probably most important step here, is tracking your spending or your expenses. We'll go into that in a little bit. Number three, understanding what those needs and wants are. And then number four is prioritize those expenses. And that can be a huge emphasis on goal setting and maybe putting an extra $50 or $100 towards some kind of goal that you might have down the road. And then number five would be prepare for the unexpected. That's something that I think all of us have probably seen in our lifetime as an unexpected expense that we've just needed the extra cash to have on side to pay for it. The example I have is I have, an SUV. I have blown a tire 4 different times in 1 year, which was very, very inconvenient for me. But again, having that cash on side made me a little bit better about the whole situation. And with that being said, it's always good, again, to really emphasize the second step I mentioned here, which is the 1 month tracking. Now, this is really important for everyone because I think everyone can learn a little bit about themselves. Looking back at the previous month, or really looking maybe at January, since we're near the end of it, what are expenses looking like? Where's the money going? Is there a heavy emphasis on a specific topic or subject at all, or a necessity that we might have? It is a difficult step to do because it is, a little bit of a self-reflection, but it does give you a good idea of kind of maybe where you need to go or head to. So again, like it says, don't judge yourself on it. I think everybody can work on their budget in some form or fashion. And that includes me too. Kyle mentioned those big life changes that everybody has. I just got a puppy last week, so my expenses are much different than they were 2 weeks ago. So that's something that I think it's really big and really important to know for those big life events, is to make sure we are tracking those expenses and seeing how those are affected over the next couple of months. And as we get to the next slide, there's a couple ways to really track your expenses. One way, of course, is looking at your statements. You can use an Excel spreadsheet of some kind if you'd like. Of course, you can kind of just gather your receipts and kind of go from there. Another one is these budgeting apps that some of you probably have seen before. You've probably seen a ton of different commercials on, Rocket Money, Mint, Every Dollar, or Good Budget. The general idea is to kind of have your checking or credit card accounts on here where you can track what your expenses look like. A lot of times they'll be put in some kind of category for you, so you kind of have a good idea of, what's a necessity, what's a want, what's, savings category. Are you spending too much money, going out to eat, and so forth. So the big thing here with that tracking expenses is really making sure what is a good way to do it for myself. Could be, again, looking at your statements yourself. It could be using an app, or it could be just an Excel spreadsheet that you've worked on for quite a while.
Exactly. And I think that one of the important things here, and Josh alluded to it, is that we're all going to do it a little bit differently. And I know for some of you, you've got that Excel spreadsheet at home. You're plugging in all your numbers every month. You're getting your statements, you're plugging all of that in as well. But it really is nice to be able to have some of the technology that we have that's out there. Another really simple example, I'm sure many of you have heard about it, is Rocket Money. And a lot of these tools and services like that, not only does it help with just budgeting the money, but there's different calls to action, and there's different ways that these apps are even able to provide some suggestions. Like one of the things that I think is particularly beneficial is it will talk about all of the reoccurring expenses that are happening every month. And I think we all are kind of in that position to a certain extent, where it's so easy to sign up for another streaming service or some type of subscription, and it is reoccurring. And we forget about it, we stop using it, but then the latest and greatest service that comes out, we add that one, we add another one, and then before we know it, there could be 4 or 5 different subscription or streaming services that we have. We're maybe using 1 or 2 of them, but it's really easy for us to be able to forget some of those expenses. And so for a lot of these apps, what it does is it's going to highlight those so that you're going to be able to go back and say, oh wow, I'm not even using that anymore. I need to go back in, cancel that subscription. And those are really easy ways to immediately free up some additional cash flow to be able to start to put it towards those financial goals that we're talking about. One other really quick point to make too is budgeting is not just about the numbers. And I think for a lot of people, it feels like it's going to constrain them and that it's going to be painful. And that's not necessarily the truth. That yes, it is going to bring to light where your money's going, what your money is being spent on, but it's really supposed to empower you and actually get you to the point where you're more stress-free, because there's no surprises. You know what you're spending your money on. You have steps that you're going to be able to take to make improvements where you need to make them. And really the goal is not just to be in the habit of budgeting, because a habit, it's a repeated action, right, that we do over and over and over again. But you need to create a system that's going to be able to work for you. That's where you have actual structure, and it's a process that you're going to repeat month over month over month, because there's a lot of people, more than 50% of people don't have a budget. And now granted, some may have less expenses or less income, and it may not be necessary, but even for those that you're living well within your means, you're not overspending, even for somebody like that, using some of these apps and some of these tools, it will allow you to move even further along with your goals and with your financial planning. It's not just for the folks that are overspending, it's for everyone. And it's not just a habit that's repeated. Find that system that's going to work for you. And I think for most people that I've worked with, I'm sure that Josh has worked with too, it's trial and error a little bit. Some are going to like apps and technology better. Others want to keep it old school and want to keep using those Excel spreadsheets. And those are fine. But really that's the point of trying some different things out, see what's going to work for you. Now, one of the easiest frameworks that we're going to talk a little bit about today, aside from using these different apps and technology platforms, is something called a 50-30-20 budget. You can see here that you're taking a look at your after-tax pay, whatever that is, and you start with 50% of that money going towards your needs, and you can see those are things like groceries, gas, your rent, or your mortgage payment. 30% is going to your savings and your debt. Those are going to be how much you're saving for retirement, building up your emergency fund, credit cards, different things like that. And then you have 20% that is going towards the wants, the going out to eat and the streaming services and those different types of things. Because I think a lot of times with people that don't have a budget, sometimes it's not knowing where to start. Use this as a framework. Just take a look at what your monthly post-tax income is, divvy that up 50-30-20, and kind of see how close or how far you are from that, because this is going to help to balance out that you're not overspending on your needs, that we make sure that you're spending enough with your savings and with your debt, but then again, that you also can enjoy your money, right? Because it's not about just meeting your needs and saving and paying down debt. We want to have a balance there, and that's where that 20% to the wants is important. Josh, how do you walk folks through this process, or what are some of the things that you point out when you're helping somebody go through and create a budget using this method?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the big thing is I love to show this slide for people. It kind of puts in perspective of, what are some valuable aspects to their budget. Obviously the necessities, savings and debt are very important, but of course we want to have some fun too, and, make sure we have some money, left over for those things. But the important thing here is really making sure that we're not overspending necessarily on maybe that wants, or maybe we're not putting enough emphasis on that savings and debt category. Those two things can help out quite a bit when it comes to our goals. We haven't really discussed, goals about maybe paying off debt, or maybe it's a saving for retirement. Well, this is a great way to kind of make sure we're budgeting enough to those things if that's what our goal is. The other thing too is, Kyle, you mentioned before, but budgeting is always kind of a work in progress. Every couple months it might change a little bit, and as you can see from the breakdown here, it's not perfect. It's not 50, 30, and 20 specifically. It's pretty close, but it might be a good idea to again look at your expenses from last month, or it could be even in December, of where are these categories right now? Is there any changes that we can do now where, hey, I didn't realize that I was spending this much on streaming. Maybe I'll dial that down. I can put that additional money into an additional 401k contribution, or starting an emergency fund. So I think it's a good start for people to maybe look at kind of maybe where they're currently at and what are some baby steps to get there. It doesn't have to be in one fell swoop over 1 month. It could definitely be over a couple of months, just based off how your living situation is, of course. So again, baby steps are really good, just to make sure you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, and one other point too, as you were talking, Josh, is, one of the things that I love to use this for, it makes it really easy to see where you insert some of your goals and how that changes based on what's happening with your cash flow. Like a real simple example would be your savings and debt. And maybe over the next 6 months, one of your goal is to build up that emergency fund. Well, once you've built up that emergency fund and you have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, now we can take that $50 that was going towards the emergency fund and now increase our 401k contribution, or we can pay an extra $50 towards a credit card, or any other loan payment. So it gives you that structure to be able to very easily make an adjustment, because what we see over and over and over again, when money is just sitting in your bank account, and I think we've all been victims of this at some point in time, when there's money in your bank account, you open up your phone, you look at how much money you've got there. When the money is there, oftentimes it's going to get spent, right? Oh, I still have money to go out to eat. I still have money to go do this or do that. And this 50-30-20 model gives you that structure to know what's going where, but it also makes it super easy to be able to make some adjustments without, having any money that's not assigned to something. So I think that that's another way that you can take advantage of not only just budgeting your money, but then also, staying on track to reach the individual goals that you've set for yourself. And I think one of the other things that really does make a difference is accountability, and having someone that you are accountable to, and vice versa. That's why so many people like to have conversations with people like Josh, or have a financial advisor. It can be a spouse, it could be a partner, but to find that accountability so that you are not just temporarily creating these habits, but you have that system in place, that it's always going to keep running. If you start to deviate one way or the other, that person and that system can help to pull you back before we get too far off track. And we have to have an alignment as to what those efforts are, right? If we've been overspending, we need to agree that, okay, we need to cut down on some of our wants, but we also need to make sure that money that we're freeing up from the wants then goes to savings or debt, or then goes to our monthly needs, or our grocery bill, or whatever the case might be. There has to be that alignment there. And then it's good to consistently review things. Just like your broader financial plan, with your budgeting, you want to check in on a month-to-month basis. And the first couple times that you do it, or as you're trying different apps and different systems, it is going to be a little bit more effort, take a little bit more time. But once you've figured out how you're going to do it, revisiting it on a month-to-month basis, it can be pretty quick and easy. But you do want to keep an eye on it. It's not a set it and forget it type of approach. And we really already hit on this, but you've got to be adaptable. You don't want to be so rigid that when an unexpected expense comes up, or there's a life event that we weren't planning for, we need to be able to have the ability to adapt to some of those changes. And I think, in my experience over the years, a lot of times some of those life events and those bigger things that happen, those do have a temporary disruption. And that is why it's so important to have a partner, to have somebody that you can sit down and work with that on. Again, whether it's your significant other, whether it's your financial advisor that you're already working with, whether it's somebody like Josh from our team, it's important to have the ability to make those adaptations and really adjust when it's warranted. Josh, any other questions with budgeting, or maybe as we kind of look at putting all of this together, what other questions or what other insights do you have when you're walking through an individual through this process?
Yeah, no, I think you just mentioned there the individual, but a lot of times we do want it to be a group effort or a partner effort where whenever I do my sessions, I am more than welcome to have partners on, to have like a discussion just to make sure everyone is on the same page, just like you mentioned, making sure that our goals are aligned, our efforts are aligned, keeping each other accountable is so important. And it really helps out when it comes to kind of driving towards that goal, whatever that might be. And every couple months, it might be another conversation just to make sure that we're all in check, or making sure that we're doing our parts when it comes to, our spending habits, of course. But again, we want to be consistent when we can, but adapt when we need to, especially during those life events, like you mentioned, Kyle, where those things can affect, of course, how our expenses are, or how money is kind of divvied up and so forth. So we just want to make sure that we can be consistent, but also adaptable when we need to. That's so important.
Exactly. And so as we kind of finalize things here, as many of you know, your repeat attendees here, our financial consultants are here to sit down and have a more in-depth conversation with you about budgeting, or any other aspects of your financial plan. I know for others of you that are tuning in, you're already working with an advisor, and so I encourage you to continue to reach out to them. You can scan this QR code and it sets up an appointment for you to be able to kind of start to walk through this process. But just a couple key takeaways that I'll mention here in closing. First and foremost, it's not just about the numbers. There is a lot of emotion and psychology that's tied to money and how you're managing your money, how you feel about your money. And when you're doing budgeting, yes, it is simple, but at the same time, you've got to find what works for you based upon your own psychology and how you look at it and what works for you and what doesn't. Really go back and think about some of those goals that we've talked about today based upon where you're at in your career. And also make sure that those life events, they can be disrupting, but be aware of them so that if and when they do happen, that we have the ability to be adaptable and to make some of those changes without it wreaking havoc on our entire financial situation. And one other point to make, if you haven't already registered for our February webinar, we're going to be diving in and tackling the topic of debt. It's another topic, just like budgeting, that is very often requested to go back and kind of revisit the topic and different ways to look at it and different strategies to help with that. So you can scan this QR code as well, get yourself registered. As always, we're going to be sending a follow-up email that's going to have a link to this recording today, so you can go back and review anything that we talked about today. And with that, folks, I just want to, again, wish all of you a happy new year. I know we're getting close to the end of the month, but very much looking forward to 2025 and appreciate your attendance today. We're here to help in any way that we can with budgeting or any other financial matter that you might have, and wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for taking a little bit of time out of your day to be here. Bye-bye.